It's time for another episode of Ignite That Light. Are you looking to strengthen your relationships and find more purpose in your daily life? Join me for a special two-part episode where I'll be sitting down with an incredible guest to explore two of the most important aspects of personal growth: strengthening relationships through communication and finding purpose in daily actions. That special guest is Aaron, aka FitzMagicChi, and also at CheapSeats411 on X. In the first part, we'll dive into the art of communication, covering everything from active listening to navigating tough conversations with empathy. Then, in the second part, we'll shift gears to uncover how small, purposeful actions can transform your routine into something more fulfilling and meaningful. Whether you're working on building deeper connections or looking to bring more purpose into your everyday life, this episode is packed with inspiration and practical advice to help you grow. Don't miss it. Tune in Tuesday for the next episode of Ignite That Light. Can you believe it?
Hello.
It's Tuesday. How's it going, Aaron?
Good.
Welcome.
How are you?
Pretty good. This is Ignite That Light, Season 2, Episode 8. As you see here, everyone, this is my guest, Aaron, aka at CheapSeats411, like they said on the trailer. Wanted to again, first shout out all of our viewers, all of our listeners. Thank you so much for being here. And Aaron, thank you so much for being a guest on Ignite That Light Season 2. We are keeping it lit through Episode 8. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just fine. It's nice to finally meet you, I guess.
Yeah.
How we do it in 2024 now. So
Yeah.
We've been interacting for a couple years, I think.
Yeah.
And this is great.
Yeah, man. It's great to have you here. And I'll say, like, one of the things that like really is so appealing about you, and I'll let you talk about more about yourself. One of the things I find so enjoyable and like refreshing about you is like your account on X is so, to me, it's unique because like you're so like focused on my passion, which is food. So a lot of what you post is like, I want to be his best friend. Like that's when I see what you post, like those pizzas that I've seen you. I think you have one pinned actually. It's like,
yes, I do.
It's an amazing looking.
Got a lot of mileage out of that one.
Yeah, man. Probably like 500,000 views at this point. I mean, like, but it's well worth it. I mean, but like again, you keep a positive attitude. And really what we do here on Ignite That Light, the goal of this podcast is really to motivate, inspire, and connect with other people. And that's why I'm just so grateful to have you here because, you know, like you said, we've been in touch for about 2 years now on X, but we haven't really actually talked, right? Which is kind of weird. Like we communicate through the timeline and in messages, but not really through this. And that's that's what I find so beautiful about this experience here in this podcast is that it's kind of humanizing the person behind the account. Like as much as this is about me hosting it, it's not really all about me. It's really about the guest. Like the host is always going to be the same. It's the guest that makes it special. So I'm really grateful that you're here. And before we kind of dive into the topics, we have two topics. We have a two-parter, which is amazing. Before we dive into this, I would like for people to hear more about you. If you can give them like the elevator pitch about why they should follow you and more about like, you know, what I find appealing, right? You should tell them more about about what your account's all about and kind of a little more about yourself, whatever you're willing to share, feel free.
Yeah. It wasn't originally a food account. I started as a sports writer back in Arkansas. So I was just posting and tweeting games that I was covering, things like that. After the family moved to Chicago, I was kind of in this in-between stage of like, well, what do I do with this? And it was during COVID when I think the food stuff started to come around. I started grilling some things and it really changed from there. So that, and now it is what it is. I never intended on this to be where it's at. It wasn't something that I set a goal out. It's just sort of, it's evolved over the last few years and I've enjoyed it. I've tried to keep in mind that I try to give people just X can be very cesspoolish, right? And if you
just like a minefield, right?
Right. Yeah. And you never know where it's going to come from next. But it's like, if you look at my account, it's something there where it can kind of like just be a timeline refresh for you, just a timeline cleanse. That's kind of what I just, if you like it, fine. I get blocked from time to time. that's just the way it is. And
yeah, man.
but yeah, it's just something I just have fun doing. I don't. There's a lot of times in our lives where we have to be serious, and this isn't one of them for me. I have a very serious side, but I decide to use X as a way to just be positive and be happy and just enjoy, and simple things in life. I mean, the food that I try, it's not fancy,
No.
but it's all good, and it's just and I'll just keep doing it as long as it's a fun thing for me to do. So
That's right, man. No, I love that. I think that's why you and I align so well on, on X especially, is that like you and I are both food motivated,
yeah,
like you said, and like we also try to use our accounts as a timeline cleanse for many things, right?
definitely.
To be fair, I get kind of pulled into some of these conversations. Sometimes I'll actually dive into them and then I'll step away and I'll like delete.
Right.
I'll delete my post after I post them, like, or I'll keep it in drafts, and I'm like, I want to click send or post, but I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe I won't do it. But I am someone who tries to learn from past errors and mistakes, right? So yeah, we try to use our accounts similarly, I think, which is amazing, and it's great. That's what I think the platform can be used more for, and I'm grateful for you to be here this evening. And really, again, the two parts of this podcast, this episode, part one is strengthening relationships through communication. So it's kind of interesting. You said like you used to be a writer, right? Like you said it was, and so that's what you did. So you communicated through your writing, right? So I think there's automatically this kind of connection to the topic. But what I wanted to talk about really is, again, like when we think about relationships, they can be friendships too, right? They start off as friendships. They can build to something more. They can turn into something deeper. And really, I wanted to kind of highlight how effective communication can deepen our connections, can really motivate and inspire mutual growth, right? I think it's easy to kind of use X and other social media as sort of this like quick soundbite component, right? And kind of use that as like, well, I'm going to make an attack with this account, or like, it's like, you don't have to use it that way. You can actually build true relationships and friendships and actually build more understanding if you kind of use the tool a certain way. So I'm really interested and really excited to talk about, maybe even giving some of our listeners and viewers some practical tips for how to actually improve the communication in their own relationships. And yeah, let's dive into it. If you're ready for it, let's do it.
Yeah, let's go.
So the first on our outline, and not to give everyone a peek behind the curtain, but we do actually have an outline. We are actually
I had homework to do.
There you go. This is great. I appreciate that, Aaron. But no, the first topic was really more about active listening, because I learned a little more about this over the past 5 years in my professional career. I sometimes I wasn't always able to kind of keep that straight face when I'm talking to somebody in a professional setting. Sometimes I'll kind of give away that I'm like not really listening. And so my boss where I used to work said, you might want to kind of work on that, because we can kind of tell the blind spot for you.
Yeah.
And active listening is one of those things that it sounds pretty obvious, but there's so much that goes into that, right? When you and I are talking, one of those things that you talk about, like what is actually a key element of active listening? And I'm kind of curious to know, like, what are your thoughts about, like, in your mind, what does active listening include, and really how does it affect, or how does it improve relationships if you're doing it right?
So I actually learned about, I guess, active listening in a conflict resolution class when I was a team leader. This was 20 years ago now for a auto manufacturing company. I was in quality, and I was I was over about a group about 7 or 8. So they sent me on a conflict resolution class, and a lot of it was they gave us some like they gave us some strategies on how to deal with it. And one of them was, as the person is talking to you, say something like, okay, so what I'm hearing is this, and almost repeat what they're saying, so they know, okay, I've been heard. I mean, that's a phrase we hear a lot today. When people want to be heard, and something simple as just giving them a few words of what they just said verbatim, and then it's like that builds a trust right there, because so much of communication is trust. Even if you don't like the person, if you don't, there still can be trust in order to move from step 1 to step 2. So
That's great. That's a great one. Like mirroring and reflecting it back to the person
that's a
you're
better
speaking to.
word.
Yeah, no, that's when you were saying that's the first thing that came to mind. That's spot on. I think that's a great answer. And yeah, I think to me that's a huge part of it. And also responding thoughtfully and also eliminating distractions, right? Like that's one of the things that I saw on the timeline actually in the past couple of days was they said somebody posted something, they said the most powerful app on your mobile phone is not really an app, it's the do not disturb function. And I think that's really, really powerful, right? Like that's an interesting kind of way to view it, right? It's you're actually focusing, right? You're actually focusing. And if you're having a conversation, like for me, I'm married and my wife and I, like when we try to focus, like in the evening when the kids are down, we try to focus on actually having a conversation that it kind of talks about how our day went. We try to like put our phones aside, right? It's easy to kind of like be kind of nodding along and just sort of answering, as you're kind of flipping through, right? Your phone scrolling through, but like that's not real true communication. And that's also to some degree, it's probably disrespectful. So like the idea of active listening, it's so important in kind of, again, like you said, building that trust to show that you care. And I think it's just really, it's like a mutual respect thing above all else. And to me, I think do not disturb is kind of like a nice reminder that that's probably the approach that if we want to build those bonds and that trust with someone, we should be kind of thinking that way if we're going to have a conversation with someone, right? It's not saying you can't actually have things pop up, right? You might have something that comes up like an emergency, but like those are exceptions. Like not everything is an emergency. But yeah, I think that's a great answer. Like the mirroring, reflecting back. I think eliminating distractions and really just asking those follow-up thoughtful questions. Like what I'm hearing is this, and so do you mean why? Right? Like, I mean, there's a way to kind of dovetail your response into another follow-on and really kind of, again, show that you were paying attention.
Or maybe you missed something. If it's here, I'm hearing this. Wait, no, that's not what I meant. This is what.
And I think that's a great point, and that's a great tip for listeners, I think, too, is that if you say something like that, you give them the opportunity to correct you, right? Like that's it. It's like, actually, you missed my point. Like, oh well, thanks. And I mean,
or they maybe said it wrong. Like that's what I said. So it just gives everybody a chance to reset and realign everything. My wife and I, we've been married 27 years now.
Congratulations.
We're empty nesters, so we just, we don't have. And we found out recently. We've discovered, like, we both come home from work and relax, get comfortable on the TV, on the couch and have dinner. The communication kind of ends while we're having a good time, kind of, just relaxing. So we found out, like, okay, a couple times a week, we'll go out. Maybe it's to the grocery store. Maybe it's just McDonald's or something. So we're just sitting there and actually talking, and we don't have the distraction of being comfortable, because sometimes that just shuts down and you realize you've gone through a week and you really haven't talked to one another.
That's such a great point right there, Aaron. Yeah, the idea of actually making yourself a little more uncomfortable, right? Kind of force the communication.
Yeah, because
it's really awesome.
We both have busy lives, and if we don't talk about it, it's like, wait, I thought we were doing this week. Well, I've got this going on. Well, if you never talk about it, so it just gives us that time to just say, okay, what's going on with you? How, because my wife travels a lot, and she's on call 24/7, so she gets distracted by the phone. I'm on my phone, obviously, but for different reasons. But it just gives us that time to just reset and just get out our calendars. What's going on?
Yeah, that's a great point too. And otherwise you're just like life partners, like housemates, basically, right? It's what you are if you're not really having those conversations and that deeper. I love that. And getting out those calendars, that's a great point too. The wife and I, we did this in January. We kind of set up our 2024 travel plan. Like we got the calendar out like the first week of January, and we're like, well, let's set up a plan for like actually doing more travel, because with the pandemic we didn't do a lot of traveling. Obviously we have two little ones as well, and we weren't going to travel with them in the middle of all that nonsense.
Yeah.
So we decided to kind of hold off, and like we said, 2024, this is the year we're going to do it. And so we actually spent like 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday afternoon.
Wow.
And like just hammered out, like, here's what we're going to do. Here's the hotel we're going to stay at. Here's the, here's the flight that we're going to take. And we really mapped it out. And it took a lot of time, but I'll tell you what, we felt a lot better afterward. And we
you've done something
closer.
together. Yeah. Even if it's something as mundane as, putting things together, it's still, you're doing something and you're planning for your life,
Yeah. And I think you also learn a lot about kind of a little more about what matters to your partner or whoever you're communicating with. It's like when they say, hey, look, I don't really like that, but let's try this. Like, you're like, wait, maybe that's what they like a little more. Let's talk about that. Right. And I think you can really kind of gain some more insight about what really matters to your person or whoever you're speaking with. If you let them kind of navigate a little bit and say, like, actually, let's try this. Let's do this. Let's throw out some ideas. And I love this whole concept of really kind of, again, making yourself a little uncomfortable to have these deeper conversations. That's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. So part 2, I wanted to also talk about vulnerability and honesty. And this is kind of a tricky topic because there are people who, especially on social media, don't want their identities known. They don't want to for whatever reason. It could be good reasons or maybe a little less so, maybe a little more nefarious, but they don't, people sometimes don't want to show their true selves. But stepping outside of the social media realm for a minute, I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts on how vulnerability can actually deepen your connections during those conversations with other people. Basically, if you are willing to be vulnerable, how does that really deepen those connections?
Well, then that's, again, connects to trust, which I think everything as far as like communication, I'm always gonna, like, it'll always head back to the word trust, because that's where and I think vulnerability, it's, you have to trust the other person to be vulnerable, and it also builds trust by being vulnerable. So it's really kind of, it's a very complicated thing. It's a very scary thing because it can break that trust. And I think deep down we know that it's like, if I show this about myself, will they accept me? And so some people can never get past that, and they stay inside, and for whatever reason that trust never develops, or it never developed to the point where you could do that either. So I sound like a word salad here, but
no, I got you. I totally get it.
Communication's a big circle, and it all evolves around trust. And I always, whenever I talk to my girls about relationships, I always tell them there's going to be a point in that relationship, whether it's a friendship, romantic, where you see the true self of the other person, they see the true self of you, and you have to decide, do I keep going forward here? Is this worth it? And it's like, at some point it's there. And, my wife has accepted me 27 years. She knows everything about me that there is. And it's, I can't imagine going through that again with anyone. And because I've been at that vulnerable point. She's been at that vulnerable point with me too. And it's taken a long road, but it's worth it. But it's tough. It's definitely tough.
Especially, like, I think, and it just, like, not to make it a gender thing, but for men, I think it's sometimes tough to really admit that we're vulnerable, to be vulnerable, and kind of feel comfortable doing that with other people, right? I think that's just a struggle that I've had even like throughout my youth. I was thinking about it when I was driving earlier this evening, and it's like I didn't even like really want to admit that I liked REM growing up. It's like it's a band that, like, maybe I should, think about that, right? It's like, it was not cool to like REM, but it was cool to like Nirvana, right? Like, it's just sort of one of those things I was thinking about. It's like, why did I not admit that? I was like, oh, because it wasn't cool and you weren't tough. And it's like, but why not? Like, and it's just like, you couldn't, I know I couldn't be vulnerable back then, but the idea, kind of vulnerability, I was thinking about this, it creates this like safe space for authenticity, right? If you're willing to be vulnerable, you sort of open up a little more of a lens about your true self. Like you said, trust, it allows people to trust you a little more. It's like having these conversations like you and I are having. it's like we now kind of know a little more about each other. We can trust
Right.
each other a little more.
Mhm.
And I think that helps, right? I mean, you start to just show that you're a little more open to those deeper conversations when you are willing to be vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah,
D
and I think one of those things that like I want to ask you another question about this though. It's like how do you foster that? Like how do you like in it say like you're maybe say meeting somebody like maybe a new friend or maybe a new acquaintance that you've made within the past couple weeks and you really want to start to like have a deeper like more honest conversation with them. But maybe like say for instance like maybe they're a fan of what the Packers
Packers?
and yeah, and like you're obviously the Bears guy. See, you're wearing
Yeah.
your Bears stuff. I'm wearing my 49er stuff. The like say they're a Packers fan, but like you also want to establish that friendship with them. How do you really have like a conversation that isn't going to be at odds with one another?
Wow. I'm trying That's a very good question.
No, I mean, I throw it out there because I think that it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like, I think you talked about discomfort earlier, and I think like I do think this is an uncomfortable thing. Like for me, just thinking about like having friends who maybe we don't even agree. Again, like I'm not talking politics, but like say we like come from different political bends, right? Like, we don't really come from like the same neck of the woods. We may not
Mhm.
like we may not even have like the same music, sports, anything. Maybe we don't have a whole lot in common. How do you really have a deep conversation with someone who you don't have a whole lot in common with? Maybe that's like another way to kind of describe that.
Again, so you're talking about building trust again, but how do you
Yeah,
do it in this manner? I think that just comes. I don't know if there's any strategy to it other than just providing that. When we go back to what we originally talked about, just that active listening. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
have them say something and you take it in without a bad reaction. Like,
yeah.
okay, so okay, you think that Aaron Rodgers is the greatest quarterback? You know, is that what I'm hearing? It's like,
Yeah, it's
but in a more, obviously it would be a different kind of a context and
of course,
having a different. I want to say yeah, I guess the mentality at that point, like a sports conversation, is a little different. There is a little bit of
sure,
a playfulness there, or as opposed to when you start talking about politics, everyone's guard goes up right
absolutely,
away, and it's about bringing the guard down. Whereas if you're talking about sports with somebody just wants to get in there and engage. They want to give their opinion, and
yeah.
um, so
It's
it
tough,
just
right?
yeah, every situation is different. As my experience back in Arkansas writing for the paper, you try to read people, um, and it takes a while. Sometimes you can't
Yeah,
do it on the first time, and maybe you don't get that second conversation.
that's right.
You know, but
No, it's tough, man. It's not an easy question to answer. That's why I threw it out there because I was like, I
yeah,
want other people to hear just how difficult it is, even for you and I to answer that, right? Like, it's
yeah,
not something that you can do easily, but I do think
hmm
that just acknowledging that it's uncomfortable, acknowledging that discomfort, and I think listening without judgment, like what you said a minute ago, right? Like they say something, you're like, well, interesting, like and I think I say this every episode, but I want to highlight it again for those who are new. The five most powerful words for me, at least in the English language, are what makes you say that or what makes you think that. Like I want to
oh,
know more, right? Tell me more about why you think that, right? Like those types of phrases,
hmm
if you say them with a certain amount of compassion, you're going to be given a better answer, I think, right? If you phrase that and frame it a certain way and you're not like doing it in a snarky,
hmm
judgmental way, you'll find that you might open up a door there that wasn't going to be open for you, right? I think giving them an answer, giving them an opportunity to tell you why they think a certain way, and kind of giving you a little more context around their thought process. I find that to be really helpful. And the first four words on my profile on X, it's learning by asking questions. Like it's
hmm
not just the memes and the funny food pictures, but rather I want to know more about what motivates people, right? And I
sure,
want to know what kind of what inspires you, what actually why you think the way you do. To me, that's fascinating. I think in another life I was probably some sort of a psychiatrist or something. Like I kind of so that's the kind of thing I think motivates, or at least it
yeah,
intrigues me, right? Like what makes people think a certain way, what makes people actually do things a certain way.
mhm.
And so like for when I hear people say, oh, this is what influence my decision or would influence my thought. I find that really intriguing. I find it really interesting, and it's just fascinating.
You're a parent, and I learned a lot of that from my girls as they were growing up, and I would tell them not
Mhm.
to do something. And, well, why? And
Yeah.
oh, no, I can't just tell you because I said so. That's the first. That's your first, instinct as a parent. But like, no, I'm going to try to give them a reason why you don't.
Yeah.
And then that kind of, I remember I do not like drive-throughs at all. I get anxiety with them. I want to
Yeah.
see somebody face to face like this. I
Yeah.
feel rushed. I feel like they're not going to get the order right. And um, so my daughter, she loves the Dunkin' Donuts and things like that. She's got the app, and she'll say, "Dad, pull in the Dunkin' Donuts." I said, "Well, I'm going to pull up, but I'm going to pull up. But you're in the back there. You're going to order." And she's like, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't like this, and this is why." And I explained to her, and she's like, "Okay, I can accept that. I understand." At 21, she finally realized. She kind of saw it from my angle because she deals with those things now too, things that she's
Yeah.
comfortable with. And as long as I give her an explanation, she's like, "All right, okay, that's fine." You don't think you have to explain yourself to your kids, but
You
here we
really
are.
do. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's the thing, right? It's like sometimes it is, there's a certain point where because I said so stops being a useful answer to a
yeah,
child, I
yeah.
find. It becomes a little more like, come on, like tell me, like what's really going on? And I think
Right.
if we're being, I think just transparent about
Mhm.
what the motivations are and the reasons are, and I think that also again goes back to that trust word, right? That you said
Yeah,
earlier, like it really kind of establishes a deeper trust, whether it's with your kids or with other people, right? If you kind of
right.
give like just even if you're not like giving them the whole picture, if you're at least telling them, hey, like like this is just not comfortable for me, and I just had a bad experience, even that sort of
Mhm.
thing is sometimes enough to get people to say, I'm going to step off of this. I'm going to move away from this for a minute and let you kind of we're going to do what you want, because I don't want, as a friend, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Right. And so
Right.
I think there's absolutely a helpful reason to, I think, actually express that vulnerability, and kind of, again, it ultimately just builds that trust even more.
Yeah.
So I can't believe it. We're already like halfway through
Oh,
the
wow.
episode, and
Sure.
yeah, time's flying.
Yeah.
I just looked at the clock, and I do want to kind of move on to like the second part, just in the interest
Hmm.
of time. The second part of the show, the finding purpose in daily actions part of it, and I love that you wanted to make this a two-parter, because this is another topic that, I mean, some people, it's easy to kind of think of this as an easy, or like or as a non complicated, not topic, but really it is, because
Yeah.
people, I think, overlook those daily actions that they do, because it's so it almost seems like it's hardwired in many
Hmm.
ways, and it's like, wait a minute, like why are we doing what we do, right?
Right.
What's the rationale? So I'm kind of curious, before we dive too deep, what's what does finding purpose mean to you in the context of daily life? Like what does that mean?
Um, I think it comes down to just giving me a reason to get out of bed every morning.
Mhm.
And what is it? What am I doing? And for the most part, with my wife traveling as much as she did over the years. I was in a lot of ways a stay-home dad,
Okay.
especially when the girls were infants and toddlers. And then as I was with the newspaper, it was a very flexible schedule, so I was
Oh
always
yeah.
taking them. So my purpose was pretty much right in front of my face every day. It was making
Absolutely.
sure the family thing kept going as smoothly as possible. Didn't always work.
No.
I made mistakes, but that's what it was. Every day I got up, how could we make this how, okay, how do I get the girls to school and make sure they're comfortable at
They have
school?
their lunches. Yep. We
Yeah,
got to
their
have it all.
lunches. Make sure when my wife gets back from her trip, she doesn't come back to just chaos. Just kind of,
Absolutely.
and then so as the girls got older and moved on, that kind of purpose. I started to question, like, what am I really doing now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where I was having just trying to go through things with, trying to find a career. I'm back in school
Absolutely.
now, and just it's easy for somebody like me with so much family around to realize my purpose, because to me it's okay. Where's my family? What am I doing? I've got my mom over here that she's alone now, so
Yeah.
we have to figure out, make sure she's okay. But I do empathize with those who maybe they're just completely single, that don't have families. What are they doing every day? Because
Absolutely.
our jobs don't always make us happy.
That's right.
So do we find it in our friends? We all, I think we all have some sort of a, not if it's untraditional, a family structure, people that we would count on in in tough
Absolutely.
situation. What are we doing for them to make sure we can help them out? um
Yeah.
but yeah, I do empathize with folks that just don't. To me, it's very obvious. So I felt very fortunate at that a
Yeah.
lot of times, especially as I went through my transition, from being
Your
this dad
career.
age,
Yeah.
and okay, now I've got this different stage in life where, okay, start doing things. You're starting to do things for yourself.
That's
You
right.
start feeling selfish about that. Creates a whole new conflict in you. It's just like it's a daily thing, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Aaron. Yeah, the it's like aligning your daily actions with your core values, right? And what your core values were right in front of you every day as you were kind of, being the ones getting the kids to school, making sure they're comfortable, make sure they have their lunches, make sure they're wearing the right, make sure they have their jackets in case it's
Yeah.
raining, like making sure they have everything they need, and it's right in front of you every day. And that reminds me again, the core value. Whenever I hear core values, I think of the Air Force, because I was in the Air Force for 6 years, and
Oh, okay.
the integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. Those are the three core values they really kind of instill upon you, right? And kind of when you're
Okay.
going through basic. And so when I think of that, it's like, what am I doing daily that is in alignment with what I believe, and what am I actually focusing on doing the right thing when no one else is looking, right? Like, even like, that's the thing, like, about
Yeah.
integrity. It's easy to kind
Yeah.
of say, well, I'm going to get up and I'm going to say I'm going to fold the laundry, but I'm not actually going to do it. Like, I'm just going to
Right.
say I'm going to do it. I'm not going to, like, that's just sort of like, that doesn't even compute in my head, right? Like, the idea that, like, I'm going to say I'm going to do something and
Mhm.
then not do it. It's sort of, it makes my stomach twist. Like, that's the kind
Okay.
of, that's how bad it gets. But it really just, when you are living a life that is in alignment with your core values, you'll find that life just has more meaning to it, right?
Mm.
And I think that's the beauty. And when you mentioned a minute ago about how, when you finally were in this place where you could actually go back into your career, we're living with that right now. We just ended up
Mhm.
securing a nanny, and
Okay.
and so that means that I have a little more time to do things like this,
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
record chapters for an audiobook project that I was,
Oh,
that I'm really, really happy to
yeah.
do. But like, I have more time to that, but I also feel kind of guilty, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this. What could I be doing to move the family part along? So there's this sort of there's this sort of like internal struggle that I think you and I are both talking about, that um, we always have to kind of make sure that we're not giving too much to something that we're really not passionate about, right? And
Sure.
finding purpose in. So I love that. And I'm kind of curious, to kind of dive a little more into this. How can someone, say they're like not you and me, like you said, like maybe
Mhm.
a single person, right? Um, how can they start like identifying their purpose behind their everyday tasks, right? Like, like they're going through life, and maybe you have to put yourself in like your single mindset for a little
Yeah.
bit here, but like, how do you begin
Been a while.
identifying like your purpose? Yeah, you said for over 28 years,
Yeah.
probably 27, 28 years. But like,
Yeah.
can you think about like what actually, how would they start like really identifying like that purpose in their everyday life?
I, I come from a Christian background,
Mhm.
and a lot of it was serving your neighbor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it's just as simple as that. Just your neighbor is the person in front of you. If you're walking down the street and there's somebody walking by, and um, it sounds maybe too simplistic, but I think
yeah.
it's just as simple as that. Just what can we do to help somebody else?
Oh
Because I
yeah,
think that helps ourselves.
it
Just
does.
from one step to another, and I think that goes beyond just, you don't have to be Christian or religious to think that.
Yeah.
That's a very universal thing, I think, within everyone. Just how can you help
Yeah.
your fellow neighbor? Just
Great answer.
you don't have to build them a house or anything, but it's just a matter of showing somebody a smile.
That's right. Even that helps.
Yeah, I was, if you don't mind me telling the story here.
Please.
I was
That's the part of this. Yeah.
I was taking the train into the city, and it was early. It was like probably eight, between 7 and 8. And this lady gets on. She had a suitcase, and you could tell she had probably just made the train, and she's probably got to get downtown to the Union Station to get a train to go somewhere. She's traveling, and she just, her jacket wasn't on right. She had stuff coming out of her suitcase, and she's sitting next to me, and I just sat there. I just, every time she would like move closer, I would move out of the way to make, and didn't say a word the whole time. It's a 45-minute trip. And just the whole time she was in movement and just trying to get comfortable. And then train comes to a stop, and we're getting off, and she just looked at me and said, "Thank you." I was like, she's like, "I know I was a bother." And I was like, no. She's like, "But just thank you for just letting me just
Move around.
move around."
Yeah.
I didn't do a thing. I didn't, you don't have to always do something to just help somebody. I could have just said, I'm sure there would be people who's like, "Hey, can you move somewhere else and do this or something?"
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you just, sometimes it's just the simplest things that help somebody else. It's that, that little, what is it, the little wave in the water? You just, one
The
little
ripple.
thing help. Yeah, the ripple in the water. Simple things can help us. It can help everybody out. So
That's fantastic, Aaron. Yeah, that's a great point. It's a beautiful story too. You basically gave this person space to be themselves and to be comfortable, right? Even if they seemed like they were uncomfortable, that was what was making them comfortable, like what they were doing, right? They were doing something, and you didn't judge them. You didn't force them into doing something that they didn't want to do. You just you let them be, right? And have their space. And that's beautiful. And I think that's something that it's easy to kind of say like, "Hey, I have to do something in that situation." But what you said is spot on. Sometimes the best thing to do is just let things be and let things go. And it's hard for some of us, I think myself included, to be okay with that in the moment.
Right.
It's like, I got to do something to fix it. You don't always have to problem solve. That's a lesson that I've learned. And it's taken me, again, I'm in my 40s. I won't say exactly how old I am, but it's taken me quite a few years to really appreciate the meaning behind that statement, right? You don't have to problem solve all the time. You can let things be and let people find out and find what actually they want to do, right? And let them do it. And so I love the point you said about serving your neighbor, and like ties into the second core value, right? In the Air Force, of service before self. It's another relevant point to me. And I love that, because I think volunteerism is sort of underrated as something that's important, but absolutely it's needed in our communities, right? Like, I think it's easy to say, well, somebody else take care of that. Somebody else will, go to the food bank or the food pantry, and they'll stock the frozen. They'll put away the frozen donations and the
right. Yeah.
If you've never been in a cold storage freezer, like one of those big warehouse freezers, let me tell you, pack a heavy coat, because those things are beasts, and you'll get cold real quick. But I've done that. I've done the repackaging of diapers for people who need them. Absolutely. Because like they're donations, but these are things that, like, they seem simple, but they're so meaningful to those who are in need. And I encourage folks who are listening, watching, to consider volunteering. Look for volunteer opportunities in your community. Give back, right? If you can. Obviously, not everyone is able to, but I find that to be an extremely motivating point, and something that I think is easily overlooked in the hectic day-to-day that we go through, right? It's easy to say, well, just somebody else take care of it. But no, like, why not us? Like, why don't we step into that? So that's a really powerful story that you said, and you recited, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I can't.
I think
I admit that there were times on that ride I was annoyed myself. But it's just you're human, but you just I knew she was going through something. You just
absolutely. And you're human. Like, you're gonna feel emotion. You're gonna feel some sort of concern. You're gonna feel like, wait a minute, this is awkward. Maybe I should do something. But that's a natural instinct. I think it turns out that you were doing the right thing by not getting really involved in that
Yeah.
situation. So well
Yeah.
done. um, the another important point in terms of like finding purpose, right, is taking small steps, right? And that was kind of it's kind of a topic that was related to a previous episode, but it's so important. Like these small, consistent actions leading to like a greater sense of fulfillment.
Mhm.
And I'm curious to know, like, do you think that these, and it doesn't have to be a yes or no, but maybe like, how do you think about those small actions? Should they be large? Do you need to take these like massive actions to feel fulfilled? Like, how do you think about finding that purpose, finding that fulfillment? What does that take? Does it require like, a massive day of planning, like what we said earlier? Can you find it in something else? Like, what are your thoughts on finding fulfillment?
I think it depends on how you are at that moment.
Mm,
If you're at a tough point where just everything's you feel like everything's coming down on you at once and there's nothing good, sometimes it's just a matter of just, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to make myself a little breakfast, just some toast. Just having a little accomplishment there, having some control over your life, doing something, setting out to do it, even if it's a small thing. I'm going to go up and put together an outfit that I want to wear, not something I just throw together. Or just making a start off small, just if it's that, because sometimes just the world is putting too much on you where you can't get to those big things. There's
yeah,
just no way so you just do something where you can feel in control and you can accomplish it, and you can go on to that next step.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
tried to incorporate exercise into that, with my just getting some exercise every day, because it's all me at that moment.
Absolutely.
Everything else is out. Whether I go to the walking trails or if I'm at the gym at school, just 20-30 minutes where it's just me, and it's something that it physically makes me feel good for the rest of the day. And it's just, you
Absolutely.
feel accomplished, so you can get on to that next thing or that major thing. Everybody, we've got Christmas coming up and the holidays coming up, which can be very stressful on people. Just having
Absolutely.
something you got to meet that family member at Thanksgiving dinner that you don't want to see. Just having something that you can control and accomplish can give you a little bit of a boost to meet that big challenge that's waiting for you down the road.
Love that. Love that, Aaron. Yeah, the idea of like those little things, making
Mhm.
yourself breakfast, and I want to shout out your daily coffee mug post that you put out there on X. Make sure people again follow at Cheap Seats 411. Want to shout you out again and encourage people to check out your daily coffee that you really do post every day, and it's inspirational. It's a small thing, but it does mean something to people like myself, right? And
Yeah.
there's this book called "Make Your Bed" by Admiral William
Okay.
McRaven. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically it's a short book. I don't think it's that large. It's really cheap on Amazon right now. It's like 65% off, which is fascinating. I might actually order the hardcover myself, but it's yeah, it's a really really good price. Literally, I see it for $6.99 right now. It's the idea of little things that can change your life and maybe the world, right? Like getting those little things and knocking those out can build up those wins, right, for you,
Mhm.
and make you feel better about life, right? And you said making yourself a small breakfast, get your coffee going. It's like, hey, I'm in control of these things,
Mhm.
and I've successfully completed a few
Yeah.
tasks. I can keep the ball rolling,
Right.
and setting those daily intentions. I don't know if you do any journaling, Aaron, but I keep notebooks. This is kind of what I think I'm known for at this point. I keep like these moleskin notebooks in almost every room, like not every room, like the restrooms. Well, I'm not gonna go into where I keep them, but I have them. Let me see if I can share this one right here. But I literally have like one within arm's reach almost everywhere, because it's
Wow.
so important for me to have like somewhere to actually write stuff down, right? Like you got to like be able to
Mhm.
have some sort of like a way to express your feelings and to kind of let it out, especially if like
Yeah.
you're thinking about something, or like maybe you're going through a stressful time and you just need to kind of get some sort of things on paper, right? Instead of letting
Sure.
it bottle up. And so I think that like you start to realize, wait a minute, like here's here's my purpose. Like, here's what I really need to get done. Here's actually what I want to focus on. This will actually will likely provide me a sense of fulfillment at the end of the day. And sometimes people will just journal at the end of the day and say, like, I'm grateful for this, like the gratitude journaling thing. Even that all, I think, helps, right? Those little things can become bigger things over time. And you've heard, I'm sure, the idea of like 1% better every day.
Yeah.
Just keep working on that. I love this topic because it's something I talk about all day, but but I think it is really comes down to, like, not trying to use another cliche, boil the ocean. It's like, you don't need to do everything, and you can still find purpose in those small things too. I'm kind of curious, like, this kind of ties into, I think, a previous topic, the challenges that really keep people from finding meaning in their daily actions. We've talked about what steps we can take to actually do that, but what do you think prevents people? Like, because there's a lot of people, like, you look online right now, like, it's still pretty toxic on the app on X right now. There's a heavy sense of concern about the political environment, like we said. There's just there's always this minefield, and I'm kind of curious, like, do you find that people are struggling to find meaning in their day-to-day life? And if so, what do you think is actually preventing them from finding it?
Oh, I would say, question one, yes. I think, I go through that myself. I think finding meaning it's a day-to-day process, I think, for just about everybody.
I think you're right.
What's preventing? Geez, that could be, it could be your, maybe your upbringing. You had no confidence because of how you were parented. You were bullied as a kid. It could be a whole. I think it's each individual person has their own life that they've lived. I look at, I have an older brother and older sister. We grew up in the same house, but we had three very different lives. If you start talking about us when trying to figure things out, I get into discussions with my brother, and you go, wow, I didn't realize you were going through that, because you share a room with the person, and we don't know what each one is going through, and how it affects us, because we're all so different, and we all deal with things. So I know that's not really an answer to it, but
I think it is. I think
let's see what prevents me when I have my issues. A lot of times there is some confidence and self-doubt there that I can, get through this, even though every time I try something, I do have some success with it, but it's still, for whatever reason, that self-doubt just creeps in your head, like, nah, it's just not going to work this time. And and sometimes that's where having people around you to say, hey, no, you've done this before, you can do this. But some people don't have that support system, which it keeps them from going forward. So
I think that's great. It's a great answer. I think, you need your cheerleaders, right? Find your cheerleaders. I have mine, thankfully, not only in real life, but also on social media, and you know who you are. And I think you are included in that as well, Aaron. I appreciate you for being that. And for me, I think the answer that I have in my head, it kind of ties into what you said, the lack of confidence. I think something that also kind of holds me back is that imposter syndrome. And I think you're also saying the same thing. It's the sense of, like, can I do this? Am I actually able to do this? And then having somebody say, actually, whether it's my wife or someone else, say, no, like, you can do this. You've done this before, or it's something that's totally in your wheelhouse, even if you don't realize that you can. It's like it's one of those blind spots that maybe you don't, it's what they call it. The phrase is unconsciously competent, right? It's like they're if you kind of like look at like consciousness and competence and like look at that as a grid, that's one of those really powerful tools, and they use that professionally all the time. I think I've seen it drawn out in a graph, but basically you have like these things that you're unconsciously competent in, and things that you're consciously competent in. You got to figure out kind of what those unconscious competencies are, and you don't really find those out until someone tells you. And so to me, that's been helpful, like to have that feedback from people, from mentors, from other outside influences. And I think I encourage other people, if you have friends, if you have acquaintances, if you have just colleagues, whoever they are, who you interact with, and or even just friends on social media, if
Yeah.
you find somebody is really good at public speaking, but maybe they just don't like it, in the X
Mhm.
spaces, right? Maybe that they're really good at it, but they're hesitant. Go and encourage them that they can do it, and tell them why. Like,
Yeah.
give them that extra
Sure.
little 30 to 60-second kind of pump them up speech. Like, give them something to kind of really boost that motivation, because I guarantee you're going to inspire them to actually step out of that comfort zone and actually, overcome that hesitation.
Yeah.
And so I
I
think that's
think
part of it.
Yeah, I think we know. It's like I know my faults better than anybody else knows my faults. You'd probably know, your faults. You're very self-aware of
Absolutely.
where of your, and that. So it's like we know all the stuff about us that keeps us from getting there. Whereas somebody from the outside, they have a fresher view of us.
Yeah.
So we've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
this, thing. We're with ourselves 24/7. We know where we've messed up and things like that, and there maybe other people don't. But that person, that cheerleader, gives you a fresh idea of just who you are, that that
Absolutely.
that you don't see, or just you're blinded to at that moment. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to also be the cheerleader too sometimes. Like I
yeah.
said, it's good to have those, but
Hmm.
also to be that person for others as well. And that's an encouragement to people listening, watching, to just kind of find those people in your life and say, you know what, like maybe I should like text this person, or maybe I should give this person a call tomorrow.
Hmm.
Maybe I should reach out to them in a DM and just, offer them a message of support, right? People are
Yeah.
going through things all the time. Obviously it takes energy, it takes focus, it takes all of that. And I'm not telling you to do it all right now, but think about that, right? Like, reflect
Sure.
on who those people are, who you interact with, who maybe could use a little extra nudge in the right direction, or at least just this optimism, a sense of hope. If that's all you take away from this entire conversation,
Yeah.
then that's okay too. I know we're really getting close to time, Aaron. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for
Sure.
your time this evening. As we kind of get closer to wrapping, kind of curious, do you find that taking a break, this is kind of one of those, like, it's kind of tied into what we just said, but taking a break from, whether it's social media or some of these other, whether it's like just social activities, right? Whether it's like,
Hmm.
going out to like happy hours, or to, playing pickleball with friends. It's
Yeah.
sometimes taking a break. Do you find that to be actually something that is a way to kind of to build back up that motivation over time? Like, do you find that that's helpful, or do you find like stepping away actually is more of a detriment to like
Me
to your life?
Me personally, it refreshes me. It just sort of lets me take a deep breath, sort of just reset, reevaluate. What's working in my life, what's not working. Just to have just my own voice.
Yeah.
Um, as a writer covering sports in Arkansas, I had a lot of time to myself in the car, so I
Oh yeah.
got pretty good at just talking to myself and having these conversations with myself. But I do find, that me time is very important, just to refresh, so you can be a better version of yourself in those group settings. Just to, yeah, but that's my personally. Sometimes people can't be by themselves. They don't want to do it for whatever reason.
It's
And
true. No, that's great, Aaron. I appreciate your perspective. Yeah, for me, that's also, I think, the same, because, and I'll just tie it right back into what we're talking about and just this whole podcast
Mhm.
itself. I used to, last year when I started this, just give you a quick little backstory. I started it in like August or September of 23, and I made it in, like, almost every single week for the next 10 weeks. Like, going through, I think I maybe skipped Thanksgiving, but like it was like a 10-week in a row thing. It was
Mhm.
nuts, but it was more of like a proof of concept, proving to myself that I could do it. But I found out, like, I burned myself out so much at that point, where I was like, I'm gonna step away and make it, instead of a weekly thing, maybe like every month or every other month.
Mhm.
And I found that was so much more sustainable,
Okay.
and it was healthier, and there was less of that unneeded pressure, right? And
Sure.
having the ability to kind of come into these conversations fresh and with a little more purpose and a little more, I think, brain power to be able to focus on what we're talking about, it works. Like, I mean, this is one of my favorite. This has been probably my favorite conversation since it's like episode 20 overall, and like over that season and this one. And I find this one to be it's been a wonderful conversation and a great. I mean, we breezed through 55 minutes of conversation, Aaron, which is unreal. But
hardly scratched the surface, I think.
I know. That's what I'm saying. We might need to come back and make a part 2 of this whole thing. But yeah, and again, what the point of this, again, hopefully people see like what we've been talking about. It's like, these are conversations that you can have with other people too, right? This is, we are not unique in that sense. This is just a platform. I hope that people see that we exist. Part one, you and I both exist. We have not had a conversation about this topic before now. And yet we had a ton of, I think, like real gems and nuggets of wisdom that kind of came up out of this. So you can do this. I'm talking to the listeners, the viewers. You can do this with your friends too, or with other people, or just reach out to me or even Aaron, right? I mean, like, we can have these conversations. You don't need to be a stranger. And this has been a wonderful conversation, Aaron. Let me just shout you out again. As we get closer to wrapping, again, like we'll make this real quick. I want to recap kind of what we talked about. And hopefully people hear this. You know, we talked about the idea of mirroring, reflecting back kind of the conversation when we're doing active listening, the do not disturb mode. We talked about making yourself comfortable with that discomfort, which was, I think, a great point that you brought up. Building trust. Trust kind of is that main component of that vulnerability and that deeper connection. Listening without judgment. Again, all of these are really, really powerful points that people hopefully are taking notes on, at least. and again, going into the finding purpose, again, finding that way to be of service to others, I think was a really important point that you brought up. Serving your neighbor, and again, focusing on the small wins. Those small wins will lead to bigger wins over time, even if it's just making your bed and making sure you're making your bed every day, which is kind of a healthy thing to do anyway. I recommend everyone does that. But get those dust mites off your bed. But yeah, and I think focusing on, I think revisiting your why is something that we didn't really touch on, but just remembering why you're doing something. It's helpful to reflect back on, hey, like this activity that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, maybe I can cut that out. Maybe I don't need to do that anymore, right? Like maybe I don't need to, do this extra activity, this other thing that I keep building into my schedule. Maybe I don't need to do that after all. Like, I think focusing on on reassessing the why of what you're doing is important. And yeah, man, I think it's been a wonderful conversation, Aaron.
Yeah.
Before we wrap, do you want to kind of like offer maybe just like a last little parting, just message to the listeners, viewers, as they think about strengthening their relationships and kind of finding that purpose in their daily life?
Sometimes it's right in front of you and you don't even know it. You don't have to search very far for your purpose usually. And then I would say, know thyself. Know what you can handle, know what you're able to handle. And so, yeah, those 2 points.
That's beautiful. That's beautifully said, Aaron. And I think, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Do what you can and don't sweat the rest.
You don't have to have big victories,
Well said, my friend. Well said. Well, thanks so much for being here. This has been a fantastic conversation, Aaron. And hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime. Love it.
Talk to you later.
All right, man.
Have a good night.
Thanks. You too.